Hello and welcome again to my channel. My name is Evans, a full stack software developer. In this tutorial series, we've been creating a full stack web application using React.js for the front end and using Python and Django for the back end. We're also using SQLite 3 database, but as we progress further, I'm going to show you how to integrate this web application with Postgres. Now, in our last tutorial series, we defined several models and also configured the models on the admin panel. We configured it on admin.py and we created models such as employee details model, we created department model, we created skills and training model, employee skill model, and also I showed you how to visualize the models on the admin.py. So we're gonna be creating our APIs with Python and Django, and we are creating API because we're using React front end, which is completely detached from the back end. In today's lecture, we will focus on creating view sets and serializer for the employee details model in Django REST Framework. And by the end of this tutorial, you will learn how to create a serializer for employee details. You will learn how to develop a view set for handling employee details API requests. Now, a view set in Django REST Framework is a type of class-based view that provides the logic for handling various view sets and various HTTP methods. So our view sets will have get method, post method, put method, and delete in a single class, which is going to allow our code, to be very simple and efficient. So with one view set, you're gonna learn how to delete from database, create from database, update from database, and view your record as well. So we have about 6 models that we've already created, but in today's lecture we'll focus on creating our view set for our employee record for our employee DB, and then you will learn how to implement API endpoints for CRUD operations. We will define several methods within our employee view sets to handle various CRUD operations such as list retrieves and displays all employee records, create, which allows for the creation of new employee details record, retrieve, fetches a specific employee information based on the primary key, updates, and destroy. Destroy is to delete. And then we're also gonna test our API. We'll do validation. And then by the end of today's lectures, you will understand how to use serializers to convert and validate data for use with Django models. You will learn how to create view sets that provides RESTful CRUD operations and integrate our Django query sets with the serializer. Now, this is not the first lectures in this tutorial series. We have about 8 lectures, so I suggest if you've not watched the previous lectures, you go back and watch the previous lecture, so you're not gonna be lost in what we are doing. Now, without any further much ado, let's get started. So now the first thing you want to do is to go to your API folder, which contains all our Python and Django codes and our backend codes. Go to this API folder and then simply right click, create a new file and call it serializer. Serializers.py. Yeah, this is it. Serializer.py. Now you have to import Django REST Framework, so you say from REST_framework import serializers. And then you also have to import the model you want to use, so you say from .models import. The name of our model is, let me check it again. This is the model we want to use. So the name of the model is employee details. So simply copy it, go back to your serializer, import serializer. Yeah, imports employee details. Now the next thing you want to do is to define a class. So I'm gonna call it class. I'll just call it employee details serializer. You can call yours whatever you want, and then parentheses, you say serializers dot model serializer. Now you define your class meta, and then you state the model you want to use with this serializer. Class meta model equals this employee details. And then the next thing you want to do, we want to exclude our created at and modified at field. So just say exclude equals, I'm gonna show you, created underscore ads and modified underscore ads. So enclose this in a quote. Yeah. Now the reason why we are excluding created ads and modified ads is because we don't want the administrator to impute the created ad. For example, when you're onboarding a new employee, we want the dates and time to be picked automatically from the system. Now if you go to our models.py, you're gonna see the field. These are the fields. We have first name, middle name, last name, gender, and then up to created that and modified that. So for created that, we say models dot date time field auto now add equals true. So immediately the user clicks on save, it picks the time, the current date and time, and save on this field called created at. And this modified that, whenever a record is modified, it captures the date and time automatically for audit purposes. So in our serializer, we don't want, the admin or the user to have control over this created that and modify that, and that is why we are excluding this field. They can impute the next of kin, end date, start date, supervisor, employee details, address, name, nationalities, and all the rest, but not the created at and modified at fields. I hope you get that. So there is another way to do this. If you don't want to do it like this, exclude, you can simply define the fields that you want to use. So for that, you say fields equals, and then you start listing out the fields. So I can say first underscore name, last underscore name, and then you define the rest of the fields you want to use and exclude this. But in this case, if we do it like this is gonna be very long, and we have to start listing all these fields. So instead of that, we simply use exclude. So I'm just gonna comment out this so you can take note of it. So we'll leave it like this. Now the next thing you want to do is go to file and then click on save all, and then go to your views.py, and then in here you have to create your view set. So the first thing you want to do is to import the model you want to use and also the serializer that we just created. So you come to this top and then you say from.serializer import The name of our serializer is employee details serializer. I'll put it here, and then you say from dot models imports employee details model, which is our database table to capture our employee details. Now the next thing you want to import is from Django from REST Framework, import response, and then import viewsets as well. You're gonna see how we're gonna use response and viewsets. Now define a class for your viewsets. So I'll say class. I'm just gonna call it AMP viewsets, and then it's gonna extend viewsets dot viewsets. So the second viewset is capital letter V, while the first is small letter v. And you define your query sets. Query set equals your database now. So we want to query employee details. This is our model. Query sets dot objects dot all. So this means we are filtering everything from the employee details table, and then you define your serializer that you want to use as well. So I'll say serializer underscore class. These are just variable names. You can call yours whatever you want. Serializer underscore class is a variable name, and query set is also a variable name. So call it whatever you want. So serializer underscore class is which serializer is gonna be this serializer that we just created, employee details serializer. And make sure you have already imported it at the top, otherwise you're gonna have errors. So you just put it here. Now we need a function that will display all our employee details. So this is our class, and in our class we've defined our query sets that it should select everything from employee details. So when we run the list method, it's gonna display all the information in our employee details table, and then this is the serializer we're using that is gonna convert the codes, the data, from our database, to a human readable format. So I'm gonna define a function. I'll call it def list parenthesis, and then you say self comma request. Now the next thing I want to do is I will define, I say display equals what? Query sets. These query sets so you say serializer underscore class, and then this query sets, pick it, put it in here, put comma, and then you say many equals true. So in here you need to say self dot serializer underscore class, and then this is gonna be serializer. No, this is gonna be display. I will explain. So this is how it works. We defined a variable name called query sets, and we said it should query everything in the employee details. So this variable name is gonna hold all the record that will be fetched from the employee details table. And then we are saying the serializer underscore class, this is also a variable name. It should use employee detail serializer. Employee detail serializer is the serializer we created in our serializer.py. So like I said, when this information is fetched from the database, our serializer is gonna format it and display it in a human readable format. Now, we defined a function called list. Now, this is our function. Whenever it's called upon, it's gonna execute this set of query and display the information on the front end, on our React front end. Now, we defined a variable name called display, and display is saying self.querySet. So we've passed everything in querySet to a new variable called display, and we are defining this variable at this top is a global variable because we'll define other function that is also gonna use them. That's why we defined it here. Now we say display equals self.querySet. It has all this information here because this information has been passed to query set, and our query set has been passed to a variable called display. And then we defined another variable called serializer, and then we say it should be self.serializer class. So it should inherit this class, this field. So it's gonna use this employee detail serializer that we created. Now we now said display, this display, when it fetch the record, many equals true because we want to fetch different record, many records, all the records in the database table. Now the last thing we want to do for our list function is to return. So you say return response, then you open parentheses and you say serializer dot data. Yeah, so response serializer, this serializer. So when this function runs, it should return this serializer, everything, all the record it has fetched, and then so serializer dot data. So our response is not picking, which means we've not imported it correctly. So I'll go to the top. Yeah, so this is it. So this is supposed to be, we're supposed to say from REST underscore framework dot response import response. So I'm gonna take off this here. So this is gonna be response. Make this response. That's it. So we're done with our list view sets. So this function will fetch all our records in our employee details table and display on our React front end. This is how to create APIs. Now, the next function we want to create is called create. So I'm gonna say define create. So create is just a function name, and list is also a function name. You can use whatever you want. Now say self comma request. Now this function we're creating, this define creates, is gonna help us store information into the database. So you define a variable again. I'm just gonna call it serializer equals self dot serializer underscore class. This same thing, so it should use this serializer class when we want to create information. And then you open parentheses, you say data equals request dot data. Now you write some conditional statement to see if the serializer is valid, then it should save. If it's not valid, it should throw an error. So I'm gonna say if serializer dot is underscore valid. Serializer dot save. So yeah, this is it. We created a function called create. Like I told you, this create function will enable us save information to the database table. Now, so we say serializer, this is a variable name, is self.serializer underscore class. At the top here, we've defined our serializer underscore class, which is inheriting employee detail serializer we created in our serializer.py. And then you say data equals request.data. Then you put a conditional statement. If serializer is underscore valid, serializer.save. We can go ahead here and simply say serializer.save, serializer.save. But if you do that, then your information is not gonna be validated. So it means the user can input whatever they like, and then it will just save into the database. So we don't want all that. We want all the fields to be well validated. Email should have @ symbol, phone numbers, everything should be validated before it should save. Now, so when it's saved, you say return response. It should return a response. Serializer dot data. Now, if it's not valid, what should happen? So you say else return response serializer dot errors. Dot errors, comma, then status equals 400. So if the information is not valid, then it should return an error message and a 404 status message. So this 400 status message shows that the server is not gonna process your request. So we don't just want to leave it like that. If the serializer is not valid, just leave it like that without passing any information. And that's why we are passing this 400 status error, which will tell the user that the server is not gonna process the request. So this is our function that is gonna enable us create information into our employee record database. It's as simple as this. Now the next function we want to define is our updates. Remember, this is a CRUD application that is gonna retrieve, is gonna save, is gonna delete, and also gonna update records to the database. Now, so you define another function. I'm just gonna call mine def updates. Parentheses, the same thing. You say self, comma, request. And then in here we can add the primary key. So we say pk equals none. Now in Django, when you save information to the database table, all the records have a primary key or an ID. So if you save the first employee details as Evans, John, for example, my primary key is gonna be 1, or my ID is gonna be 1. So you can refer to the ID as either ID or pk. So whether you created an ID field or a pk field, it doesn't matter. Django will automatically assign pk, primary key, or ID to all the records. So we said pk equals none, and then the next thing you want to do is let's just call it a variable name. Maybe I'm gonna call it mivab emp. You can call yours whatever you want. So I'm assuming the name of the organization is mivab and employee details. I just abbreviated it. Call yours whatever you want. Equals self dot query sets dot gets, and then you say pk primary key equals primary key. So where is our query set coming from? I'm just gonna minimize this and then reduce this. Our query set is coming from this. Now in our query set we are saying employee details.object.all. So our query set is fetching all the information from our employee details. So for our updates, remember, before you update any record, you need to specify the record that you want to update. You don't want to update everything in the database table. So we say this is our variable name, mivab emp equals self.querySet, the query set that fetches all the record, dot gets pk equals pk. So it's gonna get the primary key of the user or of the record you want to update from the front end and match it with the primary key on the database. So the update functionality is gonna take effects on the record which primary key on the front end matches the primary key on the database. The next thing you want to do is to define the serializer that you want to use. Now, so I've defined a variable name, serializer equals self dot serializer underscore class. Remember, we defined our serializer underscore class above. Yeah. Serializer underscore class, which uses this employee detail serializer we defined in our serializer.py. So serializer equals self.serializer underscore class, and then you open parentheses, and then you put this mivab emp, this variable name that gets the query sets, put it inside the parentheses, and then you put a comma. You say data equals request dot data. It's as simple as that. Now the next thing you want to do is to check if your serializer is valid. Now you say if serializer dot is underscore valid. Serializer dot save, and then else, just like we did with our create method. So you say else return response serializer dot errors, and then we also want to display a 400 status code. So our update functionality is very similar with our create functionality. They are basically almost the same thing. It saves record into the database, but for our updates, it fetches the record first, compares the primary key of the information you are trying to update on the front end, compare it with what you have on our database, and then when you input the information, it checks if your information is valid. If everything is valid, and then it saves the serializer. If it's not valid, it sends you an error status code of 400. Now the last method you want to create is to delete. So I'm gonna create a function called def. I'll call it delete, or I'm gonna call it destroy. Yeah, destroy. So you say self comma request comma. Initially, pk is none, no primary key. And then you define a variable. I'm still gonna call it meverb emp equals self dot query sets parenthesis pk equals pk. Now remember, our query set is fetching all the information from our database table. Let's go above. This is it. This is our query set. Is fetching all the information from our database table. And so we are saying that this variable should be self.querySet, so it gets everything from the database table, and then it compares the primary key of the information you're trying to delete with the primary key on this query set, which is from our database. Now, once it gets the primary key, you say meverb emp dot delete. It's as simple as that. And then you return a response, and then this time around status is gonna be, let me use 204. So the 204 status code returns that no further information is required to be passed to the server and your action has been processed. So this is how to perform code operation with Django and Django REST Framework. The first thing you do is to define a query set which fetches all the records from the database. And then the next thing you do is to define the serializer you want to use that is gonna serve as an interface between your database and your front end. So it takes the record from your database, displays it in a human readable form on the front end, and also communicate between the front end and the back end. Picks information from the front end and saves into the database, updates and delete record as well. So the first function we created is our list method, which is gonna help us retrieve all the information from our database table. And then the next one is the create function, which we're gonna use to save information into our database. And then the next one is the updates to update existing record. And then the last one is destroy to delete an existing record. And then so it's very simple. Now we've done our code operation for our employee details model. Now we'll go over to the next model. We've done it for this employee detail model. Now remember, we have up to 5 database tables. Now the next one is department model to create various departments, and so we're gonna do the same thing again. So this time around is gonna be faster and easier because we've done the hard work already. So the first thing you want to do is to go to your serializer, and your serializer.py is in your API folder. This is it, serializer.py. And then the first thing you want to do in here is to import your department model. So you can just put a comma here and then type departments. So one of the easiest way to do it without specifying multiple models here is just to say form.models import all asterisk. So when you do this, it imports all your database models from your models.py into your serializer.py. So you don't need to start defining the models one after the other. But I'm just gonna continue with this. When it gets too long, I'll just comment it out and then use this method. So now the first thing you want to do is to create your serializer for your department model as well. So come over here, make sure it's properly indented. So you say class, you can call your serializer whatever you want. I'm gonna call mine department serializer, and then open parenthesis, you say serializers dot model serializer. I'm just gonna copy this, I don't want to make mistake. Model serializer, and then you define your class meta, and then let's see if we need all the fields in our department model. So we have updated that and created that as well. And like I explained, we don't want these two fields because these are automatic fields. Once a record is saved, it should, capture the date and time and save into this field called created at. And whenever you update your department database table, it should also pick the current date and time and save in updated at. So we're not gonna pick this, so we head back to our serializer, and then the next thing you want to define is a model. So you say model equals, it's gonna be departments, and just like this you say exclude equals parentheses created at. We don't want created at because these are automatic fields, and then modified at. Yeah, this is it. So we've created our serializer, and then we head back to our views.py. Go to your views.py, and just like the way you created this employee view sets, I'm just gonna copy it to be faster. Take care of indentation, and then you paste it here, class employee view set, but I'm gonna change this to department view sets. Now you need to import the serializer you just created for your department. This is where I'm importing my serializer. I'm gonna say department serializer as well. And then you also need to import the model for the department. So this is it. From .model imports employee details, the first one, and then import department as well. So to make everything faster, what you need to do is simply copy this. It's the same thing, so I'm gonna copy this, query sets, so to save record and to fetch record, to update and delete as well, you also need to define your query sets. And our query set is not going to be our employee details again, it's going to be our departments. Remember, we have a department model, so query set equals department.object.all, and then serializer underscore class equals, it's not going to be employee serializer, rather it's going to be department serializer. Yeah, it's that simple. So this is a variable name, this is also a variable name. You can use different variable names, or you can continue with the same variable names you started with our employee details, employee view sets. However, this variable name you created inside department view class doesn't affect the variable name in here. It's a different class. Now the same thing, I'm just gonna copy for my list to display all my departments, from the back end to our React front end. So def list display equals query set, serializer equals serializer underscore class, display many equals true. So it should display everything from our department view set, and then return response serializer.data. It should return our serializer.data, all the data that it has fetched from the database. So basically the same thing. And then go over, I'm gonna copy our creates. So this one is gonna help us create departments to our department database. The same thing creates. So serializer equals self.serializer underscore class, which is a serializer underscore class, and then display equals data equals request data, just the same thing. So if serializer is underscore valid, serializer.save, return response serializer.data, exactly the same thing. So it's easier now. I'm just gonna do for these two database tables, and then you can do for the rest. Define updates to update our department as well. So yeah, the same thing, self request updates. This variable name equals self.querySets serializer underscore class. Everything is alright, the same thing. And then the last one is destroy. Destroy. Take care of your indentation. Yeah. Now everything is fine. So this is it. This is for our department view sets. So we will be able to list every department from the database. We will be able to save new departments to the database. We can update existing departments, and we can delete existing departments. Now let me go over to my models, and then let me do for one again. Then I'm gonna leave you to do for the rest of them. So I'm gonna go for skills. So the first thing you want to do is to go to your serializer.py. You need to import your skills model, skills, and then you need to create a serializer for your skill. So I'm just gonna copy this. So now I'll call this skill serializer, and then it's still gonna be serializer.model serializer class meta. So model is not gonna be department now, whether it's gonna be skills. So this model, like I explained before, we're gonna use it to update all the skills that are required in the organization: the name of the skill, the description of the skill, and then the departments that the skill is needed. So this is model equals skills, and then let's say if we need to exclude any field. So we'll go to our models.py. Our skill have name, description, and department, nothing to exclude. So I'm gonna say fields equals. Now I need to state the field name, comma, description, comma, and departments, depth abbreviation. So I need to take off this and make sure you're saving your document. So now we need to create our views, our view set for our skill serializer. So go back to your views.py and then go to the top. The first thing you want to do is to import your skill serializer. Why is this showing error? So this is not highlighted. Department serializer. I'll go back to my serializer, and I think I renamed this instead of creating a new one for the skills. So I'm gonna, let me just use undo. Yeah, so this is what we have: department serializer, and I'll save it, save all. So this should get highlighted now. Department serializer, views.py. Yeah. Now I'll go back to my serializer and I'll create a serializer for skills. So I'll copy this just to make everything faster. Paste it. I'm gonna call this skill serializer, and then the model is gonna be skills. And then in here we are not excluding anything like I mentioned, so you need to list all the fields equals parentheses quotes name, this name, then description, and lastly depths. Yeah, now we'll copy this, we'll go to our views.py, and then we import our skill serializer as well. So I'll put a comma here. Like I said, you don't need to list all your serializer like this. You can just import everything by saying from .serializer import all asterisk. So when you do this, you don't need to start listing out all your serializer. You're just going to import everything like this. And then the next thing you want to do is to import the model for your skill. So skills. Now you need to create your view set for your skill model. So to make everything faster, I'm just gonna copy what I did for my department view sets. The codes are the same thing. I'm gonna paste this, and then instead of department view sets, I'll call this skill view sets. This can be anything you want. Skill view set, so it's gonna stay inherit from viewset.viewset. Query set equals department.object.all. No, it's gonna be skills. Our model is skills. It should query our skills model, and our serializer class is gonna be skill serializer. It's as simple as that. Now, to list all our skills from our database to our front end, we use this code, exactly the same thing. To create a new skill, we use this same code, exactly the same thing like I explained previously. And to update as well, the same thing. To delete as well, the same thing. Now, from our next lectures, we're gonna use Axios to make HTTP requests to fetch information from our database, to our React front end. We're gonna use Material UI to create a beautiful interface, and then I will also show you how to use React Bootstrap to also create beautiful interface for our front end, which is gonna fetch information from our backend, Python and Django, and a database we're using is my SQLite. So our front end is gonna fetch information with Axios, retrieve information, delete information, update record on our database, and all the rest. So I'm just gonna end the lectures for today, and so it doesn't get too long, and then we'll continue in the coming days. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so that you get a notification whenever I post a new video. And then if you go to my channel, you will see that I have two playlists. I have, the first one is Python Django tutorial build web application. So for this, we're building a web application that has the functionalities of Uber, Airbnb, and Booking.com, where users can create accounts, book a room. Vendors can also list their room on our platform, and then drivers can also register, and then you can book a taxi, just the way it's done on Uber. And then we're using Python and Django for the back end, and then for this we're using HTML, CSS, vanilla JavaScript, jQuery, and Bootstrap for our front end. And then this is the lectures. This playlist is the lectures that we just concluded now. So in here we creating an employee record management application using a React front end and Python and Django for our backend. And when we're done with this, we're gonna create a robust learning management system, and then we're gonna create the web version of it. We're gonna create the desktop version of it. We're also gonna create the mobile version of it. And then in our utility lesson, I'm gonna be teaching you on, Python syntax, Git and version control, Docker and Kubernetes, and just some random stuff. So thank you very much. And if you have any question, please drop it on the comment section. And then I'll see you again in the coming days. Thank you and bye bye.